Hello, and welcome to Fuck the Plan, the ADHD Project Podcast. I'm Aaron,
And I'm Cass.
and we're here to show everybody with ADHD that you don't have to fit into a box that everybody else does in order to have a happy and fulfilled life. We want to empower people to do what they want to. And a lot of us folks with ADHD often end up taking the path of entrepreneur or creative or something that's not a typical 9 to 5 type of job. At the same time, there are things that we can learn from that process. And we do have to learn a lot when it comes to going out on your own as an entrepreneur, which is what I'm hopefully looking to do in my life, or, as an actor, musician, like Cassidy would like to do, or even just finding jobs that fit with your brain and with the way that you operate. So, one of the things that I learned from this whole process here of kind of learning how to be out there on my own and be supportive as an entrepreneur. We'll start with a question. What do late 1800s economist from Italy, Vilfredo Pareto, what does he and lifestyle guru and author of the 4 Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, and mine and Cassidy's old boss, Rich, have in common? Which, by the way, Rich was one of the best managers that I've ever worked for. What do all three of them have in common, Cassidy?
Well, they all apply the 80-20 rule, Aaron.
Yes, they do. So the 80-20 rule is actually named after said Italian economist. It's the Pareto principle. It states that 80% of your outcomes come from 20% of the inputs. So 80% of your results come from 20% of the actions. This is true for good things and for bad things. So 80% of what's working comes from 20% of the work. And on the other hand, 80% of what's challenging you comes from 20% of the problems. And so even just as someone with ADHD who's trying to manage their day and their time better, this can really apply to like your resources, your energy, and the people in your life. It could apply to your schoolwork, your family, your actual work. And if you really ever want to improve the quality of your life in a meaningful way, I really think that this is something that you need to apply to your life. I'll give one example and then we'll kind of get into some discussion. So I mentioned the 4 Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss. I forgot to start my timer here, so I'm going to do that. So Tim Ferriss, he talks about in this book, in the 4 Hour Work Week, he talks about how to get all of the bullshit out of your life and literally only work for 4 hours a week. Now, he happens to be a business owner, entrepreneur, and whether or not that's the path that you go.
Well, in the job I got fired from, I probably only worked 4 hours a week. The problem was
true.
I was scheduled for 40.
So I think this is about working 4 hours and still actually being successful in your job.
Quite different.
So Tim wrote this great book, which I loved, called The 4 Hour Work Week. But in that book, he talks about the 80-20 rule a lot. And so he had a business selling, I believe it were supplements of some kind. And he realized that 80% of his problems were coming from the bottom 20% of his customers. And 80% of his sales were coming from the top 20% of his customers. So what did he do? He made the difficult decision to fire the bottom 80% of his customers who were doing absolutely nothing and focus on the 20% who were actually causing the business to succeed. And when you double down on that and put all of the focus and all of the attention on the things that are actually working, things skyrocketed for him. And it absolutely like blew up in a huge way, because what are we actually doing with our time? If we can focus on what's working for us even more, then we'll have better results because of that 80-20.
Yes. And, we brought up in the last episode the kind of very ADHD urge to just constantly be going.
Yeah.
And so you think, well, I have 100 clients. I'm doing great.
Yeah.
But if only 20 of those clients are actually buying your product, what does it matter how many clients you have? You really have 20 clients
Exactly.
and 80 hangers on.
And you're just doing busy work.
Exactly. So it sounds great. It keeps you busy, but busy and productive are not the same thing.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like, how often do you find yourself busy but not actually getting anything done?
So less so now, but used to be pretty often.
It's a big part of what we do. Like, we kind of, and I don't think we do this intentionally as folks with ADHD, but we like to create busy work for ourselves. Like, we like to say, I'm so busy. I have so much going on. I have so little time. But what we're not really good at is stopping to reevaluate what we're spending our time on. And just because we're moving, like you said, we're go, 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 and we're being busy, doesn't necessarily mean that that work is moving you forwards.
Right.
And so you've got to kind of think about in your life, what are the important things that you have goals for? Like, what are the important things as far as how you want to live your life? You know, what type of job you want to have, where you want to live. Do you want to have kids? Like, think about what's important, what's really important, like top 20% important, and you need to focus your efforts on that.
And it kind of, you were in the same music scene that I was in.
Yeah.
We both had bands at one point. And when, in a community as small as the one that we're in.
Yeah. We're in Rhode Island, by the way.
Yeah. So the Providence community, it's lively. There's a lot of creative people
lot
in
of stuff
Providence,
going on.
but it's small. And we all know each other for better or for worse. And it was like my band was playing like so many shows.
Right.
We had a killer line. You'd see our schedule and you'd be like, wow, they're doing great. But it was the same 5 clubs over and over again with the same audience,
Right.
the same ingrained regulars and people in Providence who already knew us. And it was like, yes, it's good to entertain people. It's good to be out with our friends. But are these shows at the same 5 venues actually getting us anywhere?
Right. Because what was your goal at the time?
Our goal was to just get out there and make a name for ourselves in as many places as possible. We
Right.
didn't want that, big fish in a small pond thing.
Right.
We weren't satisfied staying in Providence. But when you're spending all of your time going to venues that already love you, where you already have an ingrained fan base, yes, you don't want to shun them, but maybe play at one of them once a month instead of having a show at the same 5 places every weekend.
Right. And what I'm getting at is that like your goal was to grow,
Yep.
but the actions that you were doing were nurturing what was already there. And there is a certain level of that has to be done. But what you've got to do is figure out if your goal aligns with what you're doing on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. And so for the goal, I think that when we talk about goals, it shouldn't necessarily be something like, I want to be the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
It should be like, I want to grow our fan base, or I want to, something that where there's movement.
You got to be
happening.
realistic.
Yeah, exactly. And like something open-ended like that, or to grow, to progress, to move, that's a goal that never goes away, right? Like if your goal was to play at a specific music venue and you did it, then what reason do you have to keep going, right? Not much.
Well,
but
then you change the venue.
yeah.
And then you're like, actually, now I did this. Now I want to do this.
Right, exactly. So if you're only going to have to change afterwards, then really the overall goal that you can focus on is to continue growing and reaching new venues and reaching new places. So you see how working towards one thing will put you in a box, but working towards multiple or towards progress will keep you going in the right direction. And I think a lot of what I'm trying to get at here is we need to figure out which direction we want to go. And when you figure that out, you need to be finite with your focus of your energy. And obviously that's not an easy thing. Like we all have ADHD. That's probably why you're listening to this. Like we have a tough time with directing our attention. But what I'm finding in my life is that it's not so much about focusing on more things. It's about not focusing on shit that doesn't matter. Cutting things out and having less and less and less gives you more time and energy and space to focus on the things that do matter, because it's not like we can't focus on things.
Right.
There's times where we can't stop focusing on things, and sometimes it's the wrong thing. Let's be honest, but think about 80% of the problems in your life. They are coming from 20% of the inputs or of the efforts, and if you can find out a way to address those 20%, the rest of the things will kind of take care of themselves in the background. And conversely, on the other side of that, if you have something that's standing in your way, but you do have things that are working and they're both a similar path, then why would you focus on the one that's not working? You need to focus your energies on the part that is working for you.
Yes. And a lot of people with ADHD also have a kind of perfectionist type A mindset.
Yeah.
It's a way to harness our energy. We tend to have maybe a little bit more energy than the average person. We tend to be a little bit more wound up, and we want to put that somewhere. And so we try to pick up as many projects as we can and do that. But, despite the fact that we are a little bit more energetic than your average person on average, it doesn't mean that our energy stores don't run out.
Right.
It's still a finite amount of energy.
Yeah.
We can still burn ourselves out, and we have to safeguard that. And sometimes it's a little deceiving.
Yeah.
Like, especially when we hyperfixate. When I'm doing my delivery job and I'm like, woo, I knocked out 100 stops in 3 hours. Let's go, baby.
Yeah. And then you've got to recover for 9 hours.
Yeah. And then I'm like, oh my God, oh God, it's 5 p.m. and I want to take a nap.
Yeah.
That's not great.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of things in life, it's about finding a balance. But I find that like when you have defined plans, goals, and something that you want to work on in your life, whether it is starting a business or maybe it's finding a different career path, or maybe it's just your daily responsibilities, just getting better at managing the day-to-day stuff, you'll find that figuring out what's not important is way bigger of a deal and makes way more of an impact than finding out what is important. So I'll put another kind of like analogy out there because a lot of folks will relate to this. So if you've had more than, one long-term relationship in your life, if you've had, any kind of experience dating, when you walk away from something, you often come away with a better understanding of what you don't want in your life rather than what you do want. And putting things that you don't want into focus really
it's just as valuable.
Really narrows the field down. And I use relationships as an example because it's a way that everybody can relate to it. But think about jobs that you've had. Think about friend relationships, not romantic relationships, or even family members that you've had to deal with. Like, is this adding any value to you, first of all? And if it is, what's coming along with it? Are there things that you don't want that are coming along with things that you do want? Because I really think that cutting out what we don't want is the quickest way to figure out what you really do want. Because that's something I struggled with for a long time, is knowing what I wanted out of life, out of a lot of things, not only my work or my relationships, but just kind of my relationship with myself, how I wanted to live my life. And I didn't really start figuring out what I did want until I learned the hard way what I absolutely did not want in my life.
But sometimes you have to learn the hard way.
Well, all the time. I don't know that I've ever learned
all the time
anything
you and I need to learn the hard way because that's what we do.
Yeah.
But hopefully not everybody has to do that. It is very important to figure out what you don't want to be.
Yeah.
Just as important as it is to figure out what you do want and you do want to be. There's a lot of that new agey, don't focus on the negatives, and they start thinking everything is negative because it has the word don't in it.
Right.
But it's important. You have to be cognizant of the risks you run, of the things that you don't want. And, in the last relationship I was in, bad relationship, bad times. I want to spray myself with a little spray bottle and be like, bad, no.
Don't do that again.
Yeah. It wasn't until after I had left that I was like, I feel so much more social. I feel so much more energetic. I feel this. And my friend put it into perspective and was like, yes, because you're not using all of your energy trying to think of how to put up with this.
Right. And so that 20% of the inputs, because you had so many things going on in your life. So it's not just that you were in a relationship. You were in a relationship. You had a job. You had a band. You had a play that you were writing and performing at different times. You had many things going on. But 20%, say you had 5 major things in your life. One thing, which was 20% of the input, was causing 80% of your problems.
It really was.
So in that sense, that one relationship, and look, I'm not out there telling everybody break up with your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. I'm very happily married. I have no place to talk. But at the same,
it's an example.
At the same time, as an example, when you cut that 20% out, all of a sudden you had 80% of your brain power that came back, and your effort and your energy that you had. So you had this one thing that you thought you wanted that was taking away from the 4 other things that you knew you wanted. And so by finding out that you didn't really want that one thing, you removed the 20% that was causing you 80% of your problems. And now you've got so much less stress and so much less, just time that you're wasting on this thing that's not giving you anything.
And it helped me figure out what I would not tolerate in the future, which makes things so much easier.
Yeah.
And, in that, that new agey kind of philosophy that I, admittedly am very skeptical about, there's that whole, mind over matter. Just don't think about the things that aren't important. And it's kind of the same philosophy, but it's in a much more tangible way.
Yeah.
Because when you say that, you're like, well, that sounds good in theory, but how?
Yeah.
And this is
This
kind
is
of a
it.
way to put actual items, actual objects. We're filling in the variables.
Yeah. And it's funny because I find that this is a universal thing that applies to all of life, and
Yeah.
it's scary. So I'll put it this way. It, don't think I'm ignorant for this because I know what's going on.
Oh boy.
I do not watch, read, or consume news. I don't read newspapers. I don't watch news on the TV. I don't read magazines like that purposefully.
Mhm.
You know why? If anything's really that important, I will hear about it from somebody. So by removing all of that input that would do nothing except make me worry about the state of affairs in our world, I let the things that are important get filtered to me through, people I know and through, things where if I need information on a specific subject, I will find it.
Mhm.
And I know that might make me sound, like I'm ignorant to things or like I'm not aware of what's going on in the world. But I promise you, I am well aware of what's going on in the
Yes.
world.
And it doesn't mean that you don't care.
Right.
It means you're conserving your energy because one person can't take on all of the issues in the world.
No.
Trust me, when I was younger, I tried, and all it did was give me unresolved anger issues.
Yeah.
And it made me tired and frustrated and bitter and hateful. And sure, maybe I was more consistently informed, but I was miserable and I was taking on all of
Yeah.
those issues, things that I could never actually fix.
Right.
And that doesn't mean ignore all the problems, but it means if that is actively draining you and making you unable to do the things that you love, to do the things in this life that make life worth living, maybe reevaluate what you're consuming and
Yeah.
what you're paying attention to. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're looking out for yourself.
No. And a good way to put it in context of this principle is you need to spend 80% of your time producing and 20% of your time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you follow the ADHD project, you know that I put a lot of posts out there, and obviously not everyone is going to go viral, and that's not what I expect. But the idea is that with the 20% that I'm spending consuming, I'm thinking about that. I'm evaluating it. I'm looking for alternative opinions. I play devil's advocate. Like the things that come to me that I realize are important, I do spend the time to get the right information. It's not that I'm totally ignorant to what's going on. It's just that when I hear the important things, I make an evaluation of whether it's worth my mental effort. And I see both sides and research things, and I try and make a conclusion. And I'm weird because I am a social media content creator. So I specifically need to spend time every day doing this and then putting content out online. But at the same time, even if you're not in the context of you putting things on TikTok, if you are constantly being bombarded by information that makes you feel anxious and upset and nervous about the way that the world is going, well, stop fucking listening to it, dummy. It's like, what are you doing? Like, if you actively are seeking out things that are causing you stress, take a step back from it. Like, it sounds so simple, and I'm sure I'm oversimplifying it, but at the same time, if those inputs are causing you 80% of your outputs to be negative, you need to evaluate what that input is going to be.
Even if it's just a temporary break.
Yeah.
Even if it's like, I'm going to go a week without social media. Honestly, it can
I
be
think you
very
can live.
cleansing.
Yeah. And again, I work, air quotes, on social media,
Yeah.
for
So
the
not an
ADHD
option for
project.
you necessarily.
Well,
but,
no, all I'm saying is I did take a week off when I went on vacation. We went on a cruise, and we like to go on cruises specifically because our phones do not work.
Mhm.
So, I happen to, because of, the fact that I have a job working on social media, I have an assistant, and I was able to do some of that. But that's there because I know that I need to be focusing on the 20% and I need to be outsourcing the 80%. It
Yep.
really all comes down to that is we only have so much time to work on things. And if you are spending too much of that time consuming, you may need a break from it. Even if it's a short burst, you might not be able to completely stop with that kind of thing for a period of the day every day, but you might be able to take a week every month or two and just not worry about that at all. So I think that it can come in different formats. It doesn't always have to be like completely proportional. Like we tend to work in bursts
Yeah.
rather than steadily and consistently. So I'll do a lot of work and then not for a little while. But it's because I know that when I am doing the work, I'm only doing things that matter. There's another really good book called Atomic Habits by James Clear that I read. Have you read it?
No.
So it's all about the science of habits, creating them, breaking them, like what goes into them. And it's really fascinating. It was like the number one best-selling book a year or two ago, because people from all different industries, walks of life, and all in different places really found it useful just for their daily lives. The guy who wrote it has done so much research on it, and it's really fascinating to me. But one of the things that he says in the books is a lot of times we say we don't have time. And it's something I talked about a couple minutes ago and something that we often feel like we just have no time for things. But really, if you think about how much time you waste working on stuff that either doesn't matter or could be delegated or doesn't need to be done at all, then you could free up so much more of that time. And one of the things that James Clear says in the book is you don't need more time, you need more focused action. Because if 20% of the inputs are going to cause 80% of the outputs, you need to drill down and laser focus on that 20% when you are working. I don't mean that you have to work constantly all the time, but when you are working, you need to be working on the things that are actually going to move the needle, not the things that are busy work just for busy work's sake. Like I used to spend a lot of time copying and pasting and scheduling every specific Instagram post or TikTok post that I made until I realized that if I didn't have to do this anymore, I could free up enough time to make more money to where I could hire somebody to do it for me. So it becomes a catch-22. And at a certain point, you obviously have to figure out the logistics of it. But if you keep that principle in mind, it will go a long way just in the way that you're approaching things.
Yes, exactly. And it's, I don't know. I feel like we're conditioned with the thought that if we're, being self-made is impressive, being self-made is cool. It's nice to not just get handouts and, start on third and think you hit a home run. Like
Right.
it's great. But at the same time, this kind of work hustle culture that we're inundated with is very harmful.
Yeah.
Because it completely overlooks the reality that what you're saying is completely true. It's do this all yourself, be your own boss, don't have people help you out. That's a recipe for burnout.
And not to mention it's a fallacy too, because that's not how it really works in
Right.
the world of business. Like having
In
worked
any world.
yeah, having worked at a slightly smaller company in the grand scheme of things, not that it wasn't a big company, but like getting closer to the people who make the decisions, you realize it's just people making decisions. They're not special. They're not, I mean,
No.
I'm not saying that to be disrespectful because I worked with a lot of people that I did really very much like and respect.
Some of them, though.
Some of them not so much, but there were people that I did really like and respect. And at the same time, they would make these what I would call errors in judgment too, to where the focus was on the wrong part of the problem. People would look at the symptoms and not at the causes of things. And it's like if you could buy yourself time, even with just like a basic system of like Charlie in the mailroom episode. I guess, episode 3 is a good time to introduce, if you haven't picked up on the couple of references, that Cass and I are like the biggest Always Sunny in Philadelphia fans you ever meet. I have a tattoo of it on my leg. And if any of the cast is out there watching this right now, because that's how things work on TikTok.
Yeah.
I just want you guys to know we love you, and I would love to have you on the show. And, this is a pipe dream, but you guys are fantastic.
Charlie Day, we're Rhode Islanders.
We're in Rhode Island. Charlie, come swing by Warwick, hang out.
Boy, Charlie D.
We'll come to you. But anyways, so the whole point of that is the episode where Charlie's in the mailroom. He's got all this mail he's dealing with. And that's what it feels like sometimes to be inside my brain, constantly mail coming in, mail coming out, mail coming out. And he's like, all right, Mac comes down and he's like, Charlie, what are you doing? He's like, all right, this stuff here, the stuff that doesn't look important, I just throw that out right away. The stuff that does look important, I put it back in the mail and mail it back to myself and buy myself 2 more days. And then the stuff that's really important, that's what really gets delivered. But honestly, most of the time I just throw that stuff out too. And so like that's kind of how you have to work with your brain. Like the stuff that is least important, throw it away.
With your brain, I wouldn't recommend actually treating your job that way.
Your job, maybe not, but like with the things that you focus on in life, you know, especially like if you're a business owner or an aspiring business owner or aspiring playwright, if you've got 3 tasks, if you've got to write the script, hire the actors, design the costumes, what's most important for the playwright to be doing? To be writing the script. So you need to get those things somewhere else that somebody who wants to do that can do it. You can't be the best playwright if you are also designing the costumes. And I mean, sure, you have an idea, you know, obviously these things are connected. It's a simple metaphor, but at the same time, you know, we used to say in the financial industry, bakers bake, traders trade. Like if you're a trader, you need to be making trades. We don't want to put other responsibilities on you. If you're a bread baker, you need to bake the bread. You need to hire a marketer to market your bakery, you know? And it's the same principle in life. Don't spend time doing things that would be better done by somebody else or not done at all, you know?
Yep. And sometimes it's a reconciling your own ego, especially, you know, artists.
Yes.
Especially actors, we tend to have an ego.
Yeah.
That's why we need to be on stage getting attention. But you really got to take a step back and reconcile your pride, reconcile your ego, and be okay with reaching out and asking for help from people who might be better than you at a certain thing. When the play that I wrote, I had never directed before. And honestly, I don't have much interest in directing. It's all those technical, tiny little things that I'm not very good at. And, you know, I wrote the thing. I was responsible for getting it put on. I did the casting, and I'm one of the leads. And trying to direct while I am on stage is almost impossible because who's going to direct me?
What are you, Martin Scorsese over there?
Yeah,
Like, you know,
I prefer to think of myself as Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah, maybe a mix of Tommy Wiseau and a little bit of Quentin Tarantino without the foot stuff.
Little Lin-Manuel in there.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult because it was like, well, I don't have anyone helping me with my acting performance. How am I going to be the best actor I can be if I'm not being directed?
Right.
And luckily, one of the people in the cast was a very experienced director. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, would you actually like be credited as co-director and direct what I can't?
Yeah.
And he was so much better at it than I was.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, this is a dream come true.
Isn't it like a freeing feeling when you realize that people are better at things than you are
and
that you don't
okay
have to do it anymore? Yeah. And I'll give a shout out to our production company, 476 Productions, who's running this for us. But we were talking about this, the three of us, Vinny, who's helping with our production, Cass and I, before we started, like, do I technically know how to set up a camera and a light and a microphone and record a podcast? Yeah, sure. But why would I do that when my job is to write the podcast and to perform in the podcast? I need it to be somebody else's job to record it so I can spend the time writing it, you know? And a lot of people say, well, you'll immediately react and say, well, I can't afford to do that. Or I can't hire an assistant. Or I can't afford, you know, you're starting a business. Oh, well, there's no money to do this. It's like, okay, there doesn't have to be at first, but you can get there. You know, and you need to start taking steps in that direction. I didn't just open up on January 1st of last year when I opened my TikTok account and decide that I was going to do everything that you see on the ADHD Project now. You know, I started one thing at a time. I made videos and that was it. And then from the videos, I made a website and I started to build things little by little, one step at a time. And then when I got to the point that I was giving enough value to people that they were actually willing to give me money back for certain things, then I realized, like, okay, now how can I use this to make some of these things easier and faster so I can continue to focus on putting good information out there for people? Because that was my goal, was to get information out there for people and give you empowerment and support. And, you know, the planner became, it just kind of came out of my own brain. As I was working on these things, I came up with the idea and started printing out stacks of paper to plan how I was working. And that became a product that we sold. So things little by little built to the point to where, you know, at the end of the year last year, the holidays got pretty busy and enough people supported us through purchasing the planner that I was able to use that to hire an assistant to do things virtually that would free up my time because I don't want to be spending time trying to sell planners to people. That's not what I'm here to
No, you got
do.
out of sales for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. What I want to spend time doing is creating content and information and support for people. And, for example, the podcast. It's been over a year since we started the ADHD project. And now we're just sitting down in March of the following year to start this, even though we had this idea for a while. Cass and I didn't just like call each other last week and say, let's get on a podcast. We started talking about this months ago.
In January, I
Yeah,
think.
we had a call. We talked about, all right, do we want to do the production? Do we want to hire somebody? Whatever. We got into all of those specifics and worked out the details. But you can't get there without being able to focus on those details and take the small steps. And the how can I, that I can't even see it as possible. It comes back to what I've said before. Just forget about the how for a second and think first about the end. Think about the end first. And all right, if I'm going to get there, if it were to be successful in a perfect world, what would it look like? And say, all right, in a perfect world, I couldn't just walk into some soundstage in LA and have somebody professionally do, Miramax is going to, produce my podcast. Like, okay, so no, that's not what I mean by like in a perfect world, but like, to me, in a perfect world, putting this podcast meant we had somebody to do the production for it. I had a co-star, we had an idea, we had a theme, and we had a way of distributing it to people. All right. So now how do I figure out each one of those things individually? And you backtrack it and figure out, firstly, what is the most important thing to focus on? And how can I get that 20%? You know what I mean? And focus on that. And that's what we did. And we took little steps, little by little, to get to the point of now finally sitting down here on March 3rd in my kitchen and recording this podcast. So everything that you see, everything that's been done has all been a result of multiple small steps where somebody, not just us, somebody sat down and said, what's most important and how do I capitalize on that? How do I get the most out of that rather than trying to go wide? You have to go deep.
I mean, at the end of the day, it just boils down to the just touch the mic there. It just boils down to the simple, quality over quantity.
No, you're right. It does absolutely. It goes back to quality over quantity. And that's what we've been talking about is like quantity, like, a higher number of dollars in your life is
Or
not
clients,
or
if we wanna circle back
clients
to that
or
first.
a higher number of friends or, whatever the case may be. The quantity of it is not important as the quality of it. Like, are you actually enjoying your life? There's people who are wealthy who fucking hate their lives because it's nonstop bullshit because they focus on the wrong things.
Mhm.
And there are people who just get by, who have just enough money, and they are happy as shit because they like what they are doing. They love their lives. I used to know, well, I guess I still know a family back home in New Jersey where I grew up. And the father, who was a really, really nice guy, he used to work at the sewer treatment plant. And so many people I heard say things like, oh, I could never do that. You're working in sewer treatment. What about the smell and blah, blah, blah. This dude had whatever he needed. He had enough money to support his family. His family was there. They all loved each other. They all went on vacations together. They hung out. They got along. They had a great life. And who cares that you're doing something that people might think is stinky or bad? You're talking about your life. You're not talking about somebody else's expectations for your life, which I think is where a lot of us in this day and age get caught up, especially those of us with ADHD. I'm not sure why. It could be the fact that we've had that pounded into us for entire lives that we need to live up to somebody's arbitrary idea of what living up to our potential meant, even though
Sometimes our own.
yeah, sometimes our own. Yeah. I mean, arguing with myself is a pastime of mine, I would say.
Yeah, I don't
and
like arguing myself. She's a dick.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, I'll no comment that one. I'll no comment that one. Yeah, I couldn't think of something witty enough that wouldn't hurt your feelings, but anyway,
We'll do that off camera.
But no, you're right. I mean, it's like I spent a lot of time arguing with myself, and what I argue with myself about the most is what's most important. Priorities. Like sometimes in a big picture, but sometimes in the day-to-day stuff too. Like literally, a legitimate day-to-day ADHD example. I need to do the dishes. I need to do X thing for work, and I need to run out to the store. Which order do I do them in? That could literally derail me for 2 hours. If you think about it, like, I'm not kidding. It sounds so silly, but I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that would relate. Like, what
100%.
order do I do those things in? So I stop and think to myself, like, all right, what's most important? A lot of times for me, I live with somebody, I'm married. So our lives affect each other. And what I do affects her and vice versa. So, like, if I don't do the dishes and I go to the store first and she gets up and she wants to make coffee and there's no cups clean, that's going to affect her. So I'm like, all right, so my priority maybe should be to take care of the dishes and then I'll go run to the store. Is that going to affect the timing of the work thing that I need to do? Oh, well, the work thing needs to be sent by 9 a.m. and it's 8:45. Okay. So I guess I'll do the work thing first and then the dishes and then I'll go. And people don't understand, if you don't have ADHD, that's a snap decision for a lot of people. A lot of people are like, what the hell is this guy talking about? That's not like, but people with ADHD who are listening are like, my God, this man, like you're probably out there, like, feeling incredibly called out, because I heard something like that and felt called out about it a while back. And I was like, wow, like, people don't understand that each and every single decision that we have to make requires so much more effort. And that's why I'm so adamant about cutting all of the unnecessary effort and thinking and bullshit out. And like, we hate routines, but it
It
really
helps.
it really helps us. Like, do you have any routines in your life that like have solved issues like that for you?
Well, it's tough now because
You're getting used
basically
to new ones
I'm
now.
getting used to very new ones, and it's very tough when my schedule changes so
Yeah.
frequently because, today I'm meeting with you and then I'm going to rent rehearsal. And then tomorrow I'm working Amazon delivery for 12 hours.
Right.
And then maybe Tuesday I'm doing a party entertaining kids as Wonder Woman. And then I go to rehearsal. And then Wednesday I'm in New York City all day. It's hard to build routines like that.
Yeah.
But you still try, like, the recurring things,
Right.
like my delivery job.
Right.
Okay, I have a little thing. I drive and then I stop at a Cumberland Farms and I get my 5-hour energy. I mean, we all have caffeine addictions,
Yes.
usually with ADHD.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes I will get like in a giant bottle of water. So I'm sure that I'm done with a liter. And then I go. And that is like, it's a small thing, but it's a
But
little
it's a
routine.
routine. Yeah.
And it puts me in the mindset. Sometimes I will just listen to the same playlist
Yeah.
on my way to work because it will put me in the work mindset.
Right. And it's automating things that would previously be manually done. So like,
Yes.
usually you would have to stop and think like, all right, everybody's had that pep talk, like, all right, buddy, you got to go and do this shift and get the hell out. Like, you've had that pre-work pep talk before. But if you think about, all right, what's most important? What's my 80-20 rule? The most important thing is that I feel mentally ready to take this on. And if listening to this playlist is one way that I know gets me that result, then I'm just going to automate it and do that same thing
Hmm.
every single time. Automation is the way that we reduce a lot of this effort. And I know I keep talking about it, and sure, I would love it if you bought one, but just as an example, the planner, the ADHD Project Planner, I break prioritizing down into just three categories. I say must do today, could do today, and do it later. And when I plan, I don't make a big list. When I write things down, it goes directly into one of those categories. There's purposefully not a blank list on there, because you just get to writing these things and then you have to deal with the mental hurdles of figuring them all out. So when I'm thinking and making my list, if I do the prioritizing at the same time, that automates that step and cuts it out. That's taking the 80-20 rule and applying it. Well, 80% of my problems are because I can't prioritize and I can't figure out when these things need to be done. And so if I can figure out a way to streamline that and reduce the amount of effort that it takes, that's going to solve a lot of problems that I have throughout the day. And then I know, like, all right, I know I have to do the dishes first before I go to the store. And that's 20 minutes I don't have to spend standing in front of my coffee maker thinking about what am I going to do next. Like, I'm legit, like, I will stand there just like zoned out thinking about like what the hell do I have to do next. And we're talking about like feeding the cat and taking a shower. Like, that's what I mean when I say like this is debilitating for us, because it's like the basic functions of daily life.
Yeah.
And I know we've kind of come a long way since we started talking about this, but we started talking about applying this to businesses and entrepreneurship and work and daily tasks. But you can trickle the 80-20 rule all the way down to your daily life and everything that you do. So like, I have a strict morning routine that I follow on the weekends. I mean, during the week. And then on the weekends, I don't do a damn thing when I wake up in the morning. Like, I try and spend the weekend mornings not doing my routine on purpose, because I know that my routine is set for me to do a specific set of things, which puts me in a specific set of like a specific frame of mind to do specific types of work.
Mhm.
And that's one example of trying to automate something in my own brain in the morning to put me into the right mindset and frame of mind for work and for my day that I have to do during the weekday. Like I have a lot to do on the weekdays, so that way I can relax on the weekends. And I'm focusing on the 20% of things that are most important. I'm getting myself ready to work for the ADHD project, ready for my day job work, ready to take care of anything I need to do around the house. Right. Those are the problems that require, the inputs. That's the 80% that I need to solve for. And I need to put as much energy as possible into automating that to apply that 80-20 rule without having to think about it, because then you have more time.
And that's the thing, though, the automation and the routine building, it does take energy,
Yeah.
especially at first. Like, I remember when you first came up with the planner, you sent me one, and like the first few weeks that I had it, I was like, okay, I'm going to use it. And then I just kept forgetting to use it.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's not helpful.
And that happens.
So
Yeah.
I would put things in my phone, look at the planner.
Yes.
Like right in the planner. And I think like the general psychological rule of thumb, I might be wrong on this, is like doing something every day for a month is when it starts to feel routine.
Something like that. Yeah. There's a certain amount of time.
Yeah, it is something like that. And it was the same way when I started losing weight. I used to be a lot bigger than I am. I was, borderline obese, and I had to really commit to a routine.
Yeah.
And it was hard at first. I wasn't used to going to the gym. I wasn't used to, going to Subway instead of McDonald's if I
Right.
needed a quick meal. It was hard, but once you get into it, you kind of forget what life was like when you didn't have the routine.
It's like I, for 30 something years of my life, did not set foot into a gym. And
Mhm.
then at the beginning of the year last year, we started going. We made our physical and mental health our top priority. We were getting married. We had a lot of stuff we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to travel. And it was just something that we had to do. And so we set routines with, the type of food we have in the house, the type of things that we eat. And we started going to the gym Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And now at this point, I've missed a week or two because, I was on vacation and then we were
It
busy.
happens.
And now I'm like, man, I feel weird having not gone to the gym for 2 weeks. And, I'm 33. 30-year-old me would have been like, who the fuck are you? You know what I mean? We're talking a couple of years difference. And now it's like totally the opposite. And
Mhm.
like, I personally, I know I created the planner and I'm always telling people about it. I don't use it on the weekends unless like a day like today where we're in production. Then yes, of course, I've had to plan my day. But Monday through Friday, I'm so strict about what I do when I wake up. Like I have such a routine that I put in my habit tracker. I get up, I hop in the shower immediately. I go downstairs, I read for a couple minutes, I meditate, I make a cup of coffee and take my meds, and then I plan my day.
Mhm.
And the first one of hopping in the shower triggers all of the other habits. And when I get through the end of that routine before I'm even awake enough to fight it, then I know I wake up super early, but like 5:45 rolls around and I'm done. I'm ready to go, and
Yep.
I immediately start working. I'm not wasting an hour in the morning. I'm doing things that put me in the right mindset, and I'm focusing on that specifically so that way I have the mental energy and effort to do the important work that you need to focus on.
And to do it well.
Exactly.
Yes, it's and it's not to say that you shouldn't leave room for spontaneity.
You should.
Because you should.
Yeah.
Spontaneity keeps life interesting. You don't want to get into this monotonous rut where you're like, well, here we go again.
Yeah.
No one wants that. But in the beginning of building that routine, it might start feeling that way. You need it to become second nature. And then, yeah, if you take a week off of your routine to go on vacation, you're confident when I come back, the routine's going to get back on track.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. The whole theme of these past 3 episodes has been put in the work for the eventual reward.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing.
Mhm.
It's kind of the only successful way to kind of live this philosophy
Yeah.
is to work your ass off, maybe have a miserable month,
Yeah.
but then things are going to get so much easier, so much more organized. And let's face it, when things are disorganized, whether literally physically around your house or the order in which you plan on doing things keeps changing in your head, even as you're doing them, or, your plans keep changing and you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to meet them at 5. Oh no, it's 6 now. Wait,
Yeah.
when did I not write that down? When things are disorganized, it is just total upheaval of everything.
Right.
And you will get stressed. You will be miserable. You have to start implementing a way to cut out that bullshit and keep yourself organized.
Right. And that brings it all back full circle, because when I do get in that mindset, I still lose track of things. I still go off the rails.
It happens.
And when you realize that's happening, then I know that I need to get back to the 20%. I have a list on my computer somewhere of the things that are most important, just for my life, for my business, for my regular day job. Like, I know exactly the 20% that I'm supposed to be focusing on. So if you do nothing else, figure out the 20% of things that are most important in your life and that are most important for your goals, your work, your school, if you're younger, your family, whatever your life entails. Think about the top 20% most important things.
And do categorize it.
Yes, of course. Do categorize it. And for each of those categories and each of those top 20%, find a way that you can reduce your focus on the 80% and increase your focus on the 20%. And even if you're not good at it, even if you do a bad job trying to do that and moving the needle slightly, you will be surprised how much it works. And then that will encourage you even more to continue focusing on those things. And it builds little by little, again, with our same theme that we're always talking about. These small steps eventually lead to the big changes. They don't happen overnight. They happen as a result of many small steps.
What was that Adventure Time quote? Sucking at something is the first step at being kind of good at something.
Yes, absolutely. And that's really the case. And, not everybody wants to go out and become an entrepreneur like I do, or become a playwright and actor or like Cass does. But at the same time, if you want to have the things in life that you want, not physical material things, but if you want to have the family, if you want to have the life that makes you happy, you're going to need to do the work on the things that matter and not busy work just because it feels like you're moving somewhere. You don't want to feel like you're going somewhere. You want to go somewhere.
I always say that I love calendars. And in my apartment, I have so many calendars because it gives changing a page or changing the little block to a different day gives me the illusion of productivity.
Right.
And so does like shopping for office supplies.
Yeah.
And it's a little thing, that's not harmful to me, having a little calendar obsession, but it's kind of that line of thinking.
Yeah.
The illusion of productivity versus actual productivity.
Yeah. It's not about doing more. It's about doing less and
Work
doing the
smarter,
things
not
that
harder.
the things that you are doing, you will do better.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I'm Aaron.
I'm Cass.
And this has been Fuck the Plan, the ADHD Project Podcast.